Welcome to Tales from Sector 9, your portal to immersive sci-fi audio stories. If you enjoy deep space action, rogue AIs, and conspiracy theories, you're in the right place. Tap like and subscribe to keep the adventures coming. Drop a comment and tell us where in the galaxy you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and prepare for tonight's story. They called it the biggest government secret you were never meant to know. Some had heard the name Dulce Base tossed around conspiracy boards, but few people took it seriously. After all, who really believed there was a massive underground facility in New Mexico, run jointly by the US military and extraterrestrial beings? It had the ring of a B-movie script or a late-night radio show hoax, but that was before the files started to leak. Scattered breadcrumbs left by frightened scientists and well-connected whistleblowers. One of those whistleblowers was Dr. Julian Knox, who sent the first email to investigative journalist Cliff Nelson. Cliff wasn't your run-of-the-mill conspiracy blogger. At 47, he was too seasoned to chase Bigfoot sightings or shape-shifting reptilians. He'd cut his teeth on international war coverage, rising pharmaceutical scandals, and high-level political corruption. The cryptic message from Dr. Knox intrigued him enough to keep reading. The email contained no greeting or introduction, just a string of numbers that, when deciphered, led to a location in Santa Fe and a single directive. Meet me, bring recording equipment, trust no one. The next day, a second message arrived, this time bearing an attachment labelled partial proofs. It included disturbing images, X-ray scans of skeletons that didn't look fully human, screenshots of subterranean tunnel schematics, and an audio snippet filled with inhuman screeches echoing against metallic walls. The background static carried faint, eerie humming, as if it came from an advanced machine or perhaps something alive and breathing. Cliff's heart pounded in his chest. He had an array of sources within government, military, and scientific circles, people who owed him favours or quietly admired his audacity. But no one he'd spoken to had ever hinted at something like this. The deeper he delved into Knox's attachments, the more he suspected this wasn't a typical cover-up about funneling money or dabbling in questionable research. This was bigger, stranger, and infinitely more dangerous. Calling on an old friend in Santa Fe wasn't an option. He had no idea who might be complicit. If half the things in Dr. Knox's attachment were real, security measures around this Dulce Base would be terrifyingly thorough. Paranoia pricked him like needles in the skin, reminding him that he might already be watched. In a single day, Cliff cancelled his other interviews, told his editor he was onto a major lead, and hopped on a plane to New Mexico. Under a moonlit sky, Santa Fe still looked deceptively serene. Old adobe walls and narrow lanes gave the city a timeless aura, the type of place people visited for art festivals and southwestern charm. But tonight, every crooked alley and shadowy corner seemed to hum with tension. Cliff arrived at the safe house address around midnight, an unremarkable old building on the outskirts of town, its windows dark. Despite the quiet, his instincts screamed at him to proceed carefully. He found the front door slightly ajar. The stench hit him first, a coppery smell mixed with disinfectant. Flicking on his flashlight, he stepped inside to find a scene of carnage. Broken glass crunched underfoot. The walls were splattered with something thick and dark. Upended furniture suggested a struggle, and in the flickering beam of his flashlight, he spotted bodies, 4 of them, wearing nondescript black attire. Their faces were contorted in death, bullet wounds blossoming on their chests and heads. They clearly weren't a bunch of amateurs. Military-grade gear was scattered around them, night vision goggles, advanced rifles, something resembling an electronic scrambler box, but none of them looked like Dr. Knox. Cliff's stomach twisted. The horrifying thought occurred. Did I lead them here? He had no way of knowing. His eyes roamed the carnage. One figure had a half-torn ID patch that said Vance on it, a name he couldn't place at first. Then he saw the movement. Someone was still alive, Cliff knelt, ignoring the warning in his gut to check for a pulse. The man coughed up blood, grabbed Cliff by the collar and tried to speak. But all Cliff got were gargled words before the soldier's eyes glazed over. "Where is Dr. Knox?" Cliff whispered, as if the dead man could still hear. No answer came, just the sudden, chilling realization that the soldier's radio was still crackling with faint chatter. Another voice, calm and commanding, said, "We have one body unaccounted for. Sweep the perimeter." Fear lanced through Cliff. Someone was still close by, and they had the technology and numbers to mow down an entire safe house staff. Mind racing, he pressed himself against a wall and listened for footsteps. A distant thud, the squeak of boots on dusty floorboards. They were closing in. He crept down the hallway, passing more signs of struggle. Computers had been smashed, documents soaked in blood. He recognized Knox's name on a file folder, but had no time to grab it. The voices drew nearer, echoing with lethal precision. Instead, Cliff swallowed his frustration and moved toward a back exit. He found a side window, cracked it open and slipped out. The alley outside was coated in darkness, broken only by the moon's glow. For a moment, he thought he'd made it, until a blinding spotlight pinned him like a deer on a highway. "Hands up, down on the ground!" a voice boomed. Hidden watchers materialized from the shadows, their tactical gear reflecting the spotlight's white glare. Cliff tried to pivot, bracing for a desperate sprint, but something blunt and heavy struck the side of his head. He stumbled, seeing stars. Then came a second blow, a crack across his temple that forced him to his knees. He tasted blood in his mouth. In the haze, he caught a glimpse of a tall figure stepping forward, features obscured by the bright light behind him. The name patch read MAJ, Cole Vance. So that explained the patch on the dead man inside. This was the commanding officer, the one orchestrating the operation. "He's priority now. Take him to sub-level 7, Major Cole Vance ordered, his tone clipped, unwavering. Cliff tried to protest, but the words died on his tongue as a needle pricked his neck. Whatever they injected felt like ice in his veins, racing up his spine, extinguishing both thought and movement. The world blurred and faded. As he collapsed onto cold gravel, Cliff registered one last flash of consciousness. The Major was standing over him, speaking into a headset. "Specimen acquired," Vance said, "preparing for extraction." With that, Cliff's world went dark, and everything he knew was about to be turned inside out. Consciousness returned in fragments, like shards of a broken mirror reassembling around him. Cliff felt dryness in his mouth first, then the icy cold of a metal gurney beneath his back. Overhead, fluorescent lights buzzed, casting everything in a sterile white glare that made his eyes water. He tried to move, but thick restraints pinned his wrists and ankles, leaving him splayed out and helpless. His mind, still sluggish from the tranquilizer, struggled to put the pieces together. The last thing he remembered clearly was the safe house ambush. A burning question gnawed at him. Where is Dr. Knox? But soon that question gave way to the more urgent reality of his own predicament. A speaker crackled above him, distorting a voice that seemed both human and something else. "Specimen 037 is awake," it announced, the coldness of its tone sending a tremor through Cliff's spine. "Vitals are stable. Begin Phase 1 inspection." Shadows moved at the edges of his vision. He turned his head to see men in lab coats, masked by transparent face shields, circling him with handheld scanners. One technician carefully pressed an instrument against his temple, then observed the device's readout. Another drew a vial of blood from his arm. Their eyes gave away nothing, clinical, detached. Yet he noticed small tremors in one of the younger lab assistants, as if she was battling guilt. "Where am I?" he croaked, voice cracking. When no one answered, he clenched his fists, making the restraints bite into his skin. "Let me go!" he shouted. A beep sounded. The restraints tightened automatically, as if triggered by his elevated heart rate. He inhaled sharply as the straps bit deeper. The overhead speaker kicked in again. Specimen 237. Remain calm. You have been selected for an advanced program under the Dulce Protocol. Resistance is futile and will result in sedation. Dulce Protocol. Cliff had come across that term in Knox's data's drive, but only as a small footnote. He hadn't understood its significance then, how the words hung in the air like a sentence of doom. He was living in the very heart of the story he had been chasing, a top-secret installation known only in the murkiest corners of conspiracy circles. For once, he wished the internet rumours had been nonsense. Suddenly, the technicians dispersed and the lights dimmed. Sliding glass doors hummed open, and a tall woman in a dark lab coat entered, flanked by 2 armed guards. Her sharp features looked exhausted, eyes rimmed with the faintest smudge of dark circles. She didn't look at Cliff with cruelty, though, more like wariness. She pressed a button on a small console at the foot of the gurney. The overhead restraints retracted slightly, allowing him a less suffocating position. "Cliff Nelson," she said quietly. "My name is Dr. Andrea Elliott. I'm here to evaluate your compatibility." "Compatibility for what?" he rasped, though a fiery anger built in his chest. "What the hell have you people done to me?" Dr. Elliott hesitated, glancing at the 2 guards. One of them shifted uncomfortably, like he was in on a secret he didn't enjoy keeping. She exhaled. "We've made alterations to your system. It's part of an effort known as the Dulce Protocol, an experimental project combining human and non-human genetic material to create a new class of operative." The words knocked the breath out of him. He'd thought he was prepared for anything. He'd uncovered illegal labs, drug cartels, war crimes. But human-alien hybridization? It was a leap into a black abyss far deeper than he'd imagined. She eyed the readings on the console. "I know how this sounds, but you're not the first. There have been others before you. Some survived. Many did not." "And you?" he growled, forcing himself to stare into her eyes. "What's your role in all this? Are you proud of what you've done?" A flicker of pain creased her brow. "I'm not proud, but my hands are tied. Let's just say I'm not here entirely by choice." She keyed in a code and the gurney's restraints loosened further. Cliff managed to sit up, though his head pounded with disorientation. He noticed a changed awareness in the room. A strange new sense told him the guards were on edge, their heart rates spiking. He sensed their tension, almost as if he could feel the electricity crackling in their nervous systems. It was impossible, yet he knew it was real. "I feel," he started, searching for the right words, "different. My senses, everything's sharper." Indeed, the pungent scent of antiseptic stung his nostrils. He caught the faint hum of machinery somewhere behind a reinforced wall. Even the distant footsteps in the corridor resonated like drumbeats in his ears. Dr. Elliott nodded. "Part of the modification includes enhanced neural and sensory capabilities courtesy of the the off-world genome." She paused, lowering her voice. "It's not just about creating soldiers. They're looking for something else, an interface, a bridge between species." Before Cliff could respond, alarms blared through the corridors, red emergency lights flashing. A second overhead voice, more official, boomed through the speakers. "Containment breach on sub-level 4. Repeat containment breach. All security teams converge." One of the guards barked, "We need to secure the subject." The other guard readied a tranquilizer rifle, but Dr. Elliott raised her hand. "Not yet. I need him coherent. We'll move him to a holding cell." They unlocked the final restraints, forcing Cliff to stand. His legs wobbled, still recovering from sedation. One guard shoved a set of black scrubs into his arms. "Put these on, quickly!" Cliff slipped into the scrubs, mindful of the searing stares around him. Through the lab's glass walls, he caught glimpses of other patients in a row of observation chambers. People hooked to IVs, some heavily bandaged, and others with visible mutations that made his stomach lurch. Elongated limbs, blackened veins pulsing under translucent skin, eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. He felt a wave of nausea. This was more than just unethical science. It was a horror show, a twisted carnival of half-finished experiments. Dr. Elliot grabbed him by the arm, guiding him out of the lab and into a stark corridor. Overhead, the lights continued to flicker red. He heard the hiss of pressurized doors slamming shut in the distance. They passed a sealed window, giving him a glimpse of another corridor. Two alien-like figures, Wendanda and grey-skinned, skittered past with unnatural grace. Cliff's heart jolted. They were real. Not men in suits, not an elaborate hoax. The rational part of his brain scrambled for an explanation, but the primal part just screamed, "Run!" He felt Dr. Elliot's grip tighten. "Keep your eyes forward. The Greys don't appreciate curiosity." The fact that she spoke about them with casual directness chilled him more than the presence of the creatures themselves. "What do they want from us?" Cliff whispered. She shook her head. "That's a question nobody here can fully answer. Even the generals are left in the dark. We suspect it's about trade, technology for genetic material, but it's always more complicated than that. They navigated multiple corridors that seemed designed to confuse. Cliff spotted signposts, sub-level 7 restricted biolab. On the walls were placards listing colour-coded clearance levels. He caught a whiff of industrial-grade disinfectant, the kind used to sterilise labs after biologically hazardous incidents. Finally, they reached a smaller cell block. Dr. Elliot keyed a code into the panel, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a compact chamber with a single bed, a desk, and a recessed overhead light that flickered ominously. Another occupant sat in the corner, big and muscular, head bowed. He wore tattered military fatigues. "Welcome to your new home," one guard sneered, shoving Cliff forward. "Dr. Elliot, you have 2 minutes to finalise your inspection. Then we lock this down." The door sealed behind them, leaving Cliff alone with Dr. Elliot and the mysterious occupant. Slowly the man lifted his gaze. A thin scar ran from his temple to his jawline. His eyes glowed with a faint luminescence, an unsettling effect that echoed Cliff's own heightened sensations. "Malik Rivera," the man introduced himself. "Delta Force once upon a time. Now I'm a lab rat." There was bitterness in his voice, but also a raw determination. Cliff guessed that Malik wasn't a man who scared easily. Dr. Elliot kept her voice low. Malik was an earlier test subject, part of the same super soldier program. She pulled a thin device from her coat pocket. "Look, if you both want to survive what's coming, you'll need each other. This place is on the brink of a purge." "Purge?" Cliff echoed, dread settling in his gut. She nodded gravely. "They're shutting down the entire facility and disposing of assets. That includes human test subjects, compromised staff, anything that might be traced back to the truth. We probably have less than 48 hours. The overhead alarm cut out, replaced by an all-clear tone, but the tension was still palpable. Dr. Elliot quickly keyed something into her device, then pressed it into Cliff's hand. "Coordinates, passcodes, and a partial map of the base. It's not complete, but it might help." Malik stood, every muscle coiled. "Then let's get out while we still can." The corridor outside resounded with distant echoes. Guards barking orders, mechanical shutters clanging shut. Dr. Elliot handed Cliff a small inhaler-like device. "For your enhancements, if you feel them spiralling out of control, use it. It's meant to stabilize neural overactivity caused by the alien DNA." She paused, her expression loaded with guilt and urgency. "I'll do what I can to help, but you'll have to trust me." "I don't know if I can," Cliff admitted, but he pocketed the device anyway. Desperation trumped suspicion. She gave a resigned nod. "I'll be back soon, if I can." Then she hurried to the door, tapping in another code to slip out, leaving Cliff and Malik behind. Malik exhaled slowly, turning his gaze to Cliff. "I've tried to bust out of here before. Didn't go well. But you and I might have a shot if we combine forces." Cliff took a steadying breath, heart still pounding in his chest. "And let's not wait around to become casualties in their purge." He glanced at the door, then at the coordinates to Elliot had provided. His body still hummed with unnatural energy, a cocktail of alien DNA surging through his veins. The only question was whether it would be their curse or the key to escaping Dulce Base alive. The first step of any plan was recon. Cliff and Malik huddled in their cramped cell, reviewing the partial map Dr. Elliot had given them. It was a rough layout, a honeycomb of labs, storage rooms, living quarters and corridors linking up to elevator shafts. The critical path led to sub-level 1, where an emergency surface elevator supposedly allowed quick exits during catastrophic breaches. But between them and freedom lay a legion of armed guards, surveillance drones, and who knew what else the Dulce Base staff had cooked up. Cliff's new perceptions made the environment feel both overwhelming and strangely navigable. He could pick out footsteps from down the hall, sense the slight shift in electrical current when a door unlocked. Malik was no slouch either. Years of Delta Force training plus his own set of enhancements, whatever twisted science had done to him, made him an imposing ally. "We have to move soon," Malik said, cross-referencing the map. "They'll continue collecting test subjects, but once they're ready to wipe everything, they'll lock down the entire base. We can't wait." Cliff nodded. "Agreed. We should create a diversion, something that draws security away while we move." A faint smirk tugged at Malik's lip. "I've got an idea. We head for the armory on sub-level 6. Last time they tried to dispose of me, I learned the codes. If we can sabotage a few supply lines, blow a few key doors, that'll set off alarms in multiple sectors." Cliff exhaled, an adrenaline already coursing through him. "That's a plan." He tried the door's control panel, but it was locked. They'd need to time their escape for when the guards delivered the next meal or medical check. Sure enough, after about 30 minutes, a time that stretched like an eternity, the cell door slid open with a mechanical whir. A single guard entered, a tray of food in his hands, weapon slung over his shoulder. He looked bored, but only until he realized Cliff and Malik were waiting on either side of the doorway. Before the guard could shout, Malik grabbed his rifle and slammed the butt into his face, dropping him to the floor. Cliff snatched a stun baton from the guard's belt and jammed it into his ribcage, ensuring he stayed down. They yanked the guard's uniform keycard and comm device. Cautiously, they peered into the hallway, cameras perched high on the walls, scanning for movement. Cliff drew on his heightened senses, feeling the faint whir as each camera rotated. Timing their steps with that rotation, they advanced swiftly until they found an access panel leading to a maintenance corridor. The inside of Dulce Base was a labyrinth of steel plating, flickering fluorescent lights, and large glass observation windows revealing labs that ranged from sterile to nightmarish. In one lab, they glimpsed an abomination that made Cliff's stomach churn. A half-formed humanoid slumped in a nutrient vat, twitching with spidery limbs that didn't fully connect to any normal skeleton. Instead of a face, it had fleshy lumps that seemed to shift independently. Technicians hurried around it, monitoring vital signs and ignoring the creature's silent agony. Cliff forced himself to look away, heart hammering. This was the future Denocchis had been warning about. "Focus," Malik whispered, noticing Cliff's distraction. "Armory is down this corridor and 2 levels up." They ducked into a nearby elevator, using the guard's stolen card to access sub-level 6. As the doors closed, Cliff's mind drifted to Dr. Elliot. Was she risking her life to help them? Or was she just playing a game? For the moment, trust was all they had. A beep signaled their arrival at sub-level 6. The door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor. The overhead alarms had ceased for now, replaced by the standard hum of base operations. They crept forward until they found a large steel door marked Armory, authorized personnel only. Malik punched in a code on the keypad. For a tense moment the display blinked red, then it turned green, and the door slid open. Inside, rows of rifles, handguns and advanced weaponry lined the walls, interspersed with locked cases of explosives. Cliff felt both relief and dread. They would arm themselves, but the base's security would respond in force the moment they unleashed any real damage. Malik grabbed a small duffel bag and began filling it with explosives and detonators. Cliff checked a row of sidearms, selecting a lightweight pistol that felt balanced in his hand. He also noticed a series of unusual gadgets, plasma cutters and strange tube-like devices with instructions in partial English, partial alien script. It made his skin crawl, but he grabbed one for good measure. "We set charges at junction points, ventilation shafts, power generators," Malik said, strapping an assault rifle over his shoulder. "It'll flood the base with confusion. We'll use that chaos to get to sub-level 1. They stepped out of the armory and hurried down the corridor. Cliff's mind whirred with the moral weight of what they were about to do. People, some likely coerced or unaware of the base's darkest secrets, could die in the blast. But if they didn't fight their way out, they'd be next. In a place like Dulce, the lines between innocence and complicity had been eroded to dust. At the first junction, Malik placed a small block of C4 near the main power relay. He set a remote detonator, then they moved on. Next came a side corridor leading to the ventilation substation. Each move was methodical, each step a gamble. They crept past labs where creatures shrieked behind thick glass, and offices where staff typed away, oblivious to the looming threat. Cliff's heart hammered each time they planted another explosive. Then everything went sideways. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with 3 security drones hovering in midair. The drones looked like floating orbs armed with scanning lenses and paralyzing tasers. They beeped in unison, focusing on the intruders. Malik fired first, unleashing a short burst from his rifle. 2 drones spiraled out of control, sparks showering the corridor, but the third shot a crackling bolt of electricity. Cliff felt a jolt of agony rip through him, forcing him to his knees. Pain flared across his nerves, short-circuiting his thoughts. But in the frenzy of adrenaline, something inside him surged. The alien enhancements. The electricity crackled but didn't incapacitate him as it should have. His vision dimmed for a second, then sharpened to a razor's edge. He forced himself upright, raised his pistol with uncanny clarity, and fired a single shot into the drone's power module. It dropped like a stone. Panting, Cliff stared at his shaking hands. They were still intact, though his muscles twitched from the shock. Malik stared at him, a mixture of awe and concern. Man, that was some next-level resilience. "I can't even explain it," Cliff muttered. "Let's not rely on it more than we have to." Alarms flared again, red lights spinning. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Unauthorized weapons fire detected in sub-level 6. Security teams converge immediately." Time to move. They dashed through corridors, confronted by guards who fired on sight. Cliff's reflexes felt supercharged. Bullets seemed slower than usual, giving him precious milliseconds to dodge or find cover. Malik's strength was formidable, delivering lethal close-quarters takedowns with brutal efficiency. Together, they carved a path toward the emergency staircase. Outside a sealed bulkhead door, they planted their final block of C4. Malik checked his watch, set the timer, and gave Cliff a grim nod. "All set. Let's get upstairs before we blow this joint." As they raced upward, the base descended into chaos. Doors slammed shut, klaxons wailed, and personnel hurried in every direction. Cliff glimpsed men in hazmat suits sprinting with canisters labelled biohazard, while scientists scrambled to secure data drives. Over the comm channels they'd stolen, frantic voices overlapped. "Containment breach in Lab 14. Subject is loose. We're losing power in the main corridor. Backup generators failing." Exactly the diversion they needed. They pressed on, eventually reaching a storage area connected to a side route that led to Sublevel 1. But as they turned into the corridor, a terrifying figure blocked their path. A heavily mutated guard. His face was partially hidden behind an organic mask fused with his own flesh, eyes luminescent and swirling with chaotic patterns. He let out an otherworldly roar, brandishing a twisted arm that ended in bone-like blades. Malik fired a burst at the creature. The bullets impacted, but it only staggered back, shrieking in a mixture of rage and pain. Cliff aimed the weird, tube-like alien device he'd grabbed from the armory, pressing the single button it offered. A beam of intense blue light shot out, slicing across the creature's torso. It howled, dropping to its knees as blackish fluid oozed from the wound. They sidestepped the thrashing thing, each step a reminder they were far from safe. Just before they crossed into Sublevel 1, the floor vibrated as Malik pressed the detonator. A thunderous series of explosions rippled through the base. Lights flickered, sections of the corridor collapsed, and the overhead speaker crackled before dying out. For a brief moment, everything was chaos incarnate. In that chaos lay their hope of freedom. They found a hatch leading to a service tunnel. Malik pried it open, and they crawled through the tight space, hearts pounding, each of them aware that Dulce Base wouldn't give up its secrets or its captives easily. The service tunnel opened into a dimly lit maintenance shaft, the air thick with dust and the stench of burning wires. Cliff's heart hammered in his chest. While the bombs had created a distraction, they also made the facility unstable. Sparks fizzled from broken conduits, and overhead pipes hissed with escaping steam. If they took a wrong turn, they risked being crushed by collapsing ceilings or roasted in a sudden burst of superheated air. Malik led the way, pausing to consult the stolen map. "We should be close to the transport tunnel that runs parallel to the main hall." His voice was hushed but tinged with urgency. From somewhere above, a mechanical grinding noise resonated, followed by a distant roar, like metal being torn asunder. Cliff grimaced, imagining the monstrous experiments that might be on the loose now that sections of the base were compromised. Crouching low, they moved deeper into the tunnel until they found a grated door. On the other side was a narrow catwalk overlooking a subterranean transport track. Flatbed carts and cargo shuttles were parked on rails that stretched into darkness. Beyond them, a massive freight elevator led up toward the hidden hangar, rumoured to exist beneath Archuleta Mesa. "That's our ticket," Malik said, pointing to a small cargo shuttle that looked operational. "We'll ride it toward the hangar, then take the elevator the rest of the way." Cliff nodded, assuming we can power it up. He spotted a control panel near the tracks. Let's hope those charges didn't fry everything. They pried open the grated door. Cliff jumped down onto the rails, wincing at the jolt of pain in his still recovering muscles. The area was eerily silent, save for a low hum of emergency generators. A quick glance around showed no immediate guards. Most were probably battling the meltdown in other sections. Malik rushed to the shuttle's cockpit, flicking switches. After a tense moment, lights on the console winked to life, accompanied by a subdued electric whir. Cliff exhaled in relief. "We're good to go." He was about to climb aboard when the overhead alarms came back to life with a vengeance. A harsh siren echoed through the tunnel. "Security override initiated. All personnel secure priority assets and prepare for purge protocols." "They're speeding up the timeline," Malik hissed, eyes narrowing. "We gotta move." Cliff scanned the area. Across the tunnel, a massive blast door began descending, an obvious attempt to seal them in. "Floor it!" he shouted, leaping onto the shuttle. Malik slammed the throttle, and the cargo shuttle lurched forward with surprising speed. The wheels squealed on the rails as they hurtled toward the narrowing gap beneath the blast door. For an instant, Cliff was sure they'd be sliced in half, but the shuttle skidded through just as the door slammed shut behind them. A deafening clang reverberated, followed by a rush of stale air that nearly knocked Cliff off balance. They were now in a narrower corridor leading to the freight elevator. The overhead lighting flickered, revealing graffiti scrawled along the walls in a language Cliff couldn't decipher. Perhaps it was alien script. The tension in his chest didn't let up for a second. They were so close to the rumoured exit, but so much could still go wrong. The shuttle slowed to a halt beside the freight elevator. It was colossal, capable of lifting entire trucks. Cliff jumped out first, scanning for any signs of life. The place looked deserted, no guards, no staff, just flickering lights and the drone of distant machinery. "Let's get this thing powered," Malik said, pointing to the control panel on the wall. He approached it warily, half expecting a booby trap or a guard to pop out. As he flipped switches, the elevator groaned to life. A cage-like barrier retracted, revealing a broad platform. Cliff and Malik hurried onto it, and Malik keyed in the command to ascend. The elevator rattled, then began its slow climb upward. Halfway up, the elevator shuddered to a stop so abruptly that Cliff lurched, nearly losing his footing. Red lights flashed on the control panel. "Damn it," Malik cursed. "They've cut power to the upper levels." Cliff clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. "We're stuck between floors in the middle of a meltdown?" Before Malik could answer, a hail of gunfire pinged against the metal walls. They ducked, pressing themselves flat against the floor. From the open sides of the elevator shaft, Black Ops soldiers had begun rappelling down ropes, weapons trained on them. One voice boomed, "Stand down or we'll light you up!" Malik's jaw tightened. He fired a burst at the rope lines, severing two of them. Soldiers tumbled screaming into the depths below. Another soldier returned fire, ricocheting bullets off the elevator's frame. Cliff's alien-enhanced reflexes flared. He snatched up the bizarre alien tube weapon again, but it sputtered, maybe drained from earlier use. With no time to figure it out, he resorted to his pistol, placing careful shots to keep the soldiers at bay. The elevator shaft turned into a war zone, muzzle flashes illuminating the gloom. Amidst the chaos, a familiar voice echoed from above. "Hold your fire! We need the specimen alive!" Cliff recognized Major Cole Vance's commanding tone. Goosebumps prickled his arms. Malik snarled, pointing his weapon upward. But Vance tossed a flashbang into the open shaft. It detonated, unleashing a blinding light and piercing ring. Cliff's enhanced senses went haywire and pain tore through his head. He dropped his gun, clutching his skull as white noise roared in his ears. When his vision cleared, soldiers in tactical gear descended onto the elevator platform, rifles pressed against Cliff and Malik. They were trapped, cornered on all sides. Major Vance lowered himself from the rope, landing with predatory grace. His face was stone cold, no hint of triumph or regret, just duty. "Malik Rivera," he said flatly, shifting his attention to the hulking figure. "I expected better from you. I see the enhancements have kept you resilient." Then his gaze settled on Cliff. "And Mr. Nelson, our star journalist, you've caused quite the commotion." Cliff's mind reeled, searching for any advantage. None was apparent. He could feel the tension radiating from Malik, who looked ready to charge even though the odds were impossible. Suddenly, a savage roar echoed through the shaft, something inhuman. The next moment, one of the half-mutated test subjects came crashing down from above, landing on a group of soldiers. Gunfire erupted. Screams tore through the air. The monstrous creature, a writhing mass of flesh and bony protrusions, slashed with clawed appendages, eviscerating two men instantly. Seizing the opening, Malik grabbed Cliff's arm. "Go!" He charged forward, tackling two stunned soldiers. Cliff dove for the edge of the elevator, found a ladder built into the shaft's side, and scrambled to cling onto it. Bullets whizzed overhead, some striking the creature as it flailed. The entire platform rocked from the struggle, sparks flying from cut cables. Malik followed Cliff up the ladder, launching himself onto the rungs just as the feral experiment tore into another soldier. Major Vance cursed, stepping back while trying to steady his aim. Cliff spared one glance down. Vance's expression burned with anger as he levelled his rifle at the creature. Then the elevator platform jerked violently, sending men and monster alike plummeting into the darkness. "Malik, climb!" Cliff shouted. They ascended the ladder, adrenaline surging. At last they reached an access panel, led into another corridor. Malik kicked it open, and they hauled themselves inside, collapsing onto the cold floor, panting, battered but alive. They found themselves in a wide hallway lined with support beams and sealed doors. Overhead, flickering fluorescent lights revealed a sign. Sub-level 1. Exit access. Relief flooded Cliff. They were near the surface elevator now. Cautiously they limped forward, rounding a corner until they reached the final set of blast doors. But as they approached, the doors hissed open, revealing Major Vance and a team of Black Ops soldiers. Blood stained Vance's uniform, and his left arm hung at an odd angle, yet his eyes were cold as ever. "Stand down," he demanded, voice echoing in the corridor. Rifles trained on Cliff and Malik, fingers on triggers. Malik levelled his own rifle, though he was outnumbered. Cliff's heart pounded. This was a standoff with no easy escape. The last barrier between them and freedom, blocked by the relentless, well-trained operatives. Then something in Malik snapped. His eyes glowed with a frenzied light. Before Cliff could stop him, he let out a guttural battle cry and charged. Gunfire exploded through the corridor, strobing everything in flashes. Malik took multiple hits but kept going, fueled by the same alien enhancements that had saved Cliff earlier. He crashed into the line of soldiers, scattering them like bowling pins. Cliff seized the moment, spotting a control console on the wall. He sprinted for it under a hail of bullets. Pain scorched his shoulder as a round grazed him, but he managed to slam his hand onto the emergency override. The final blast doors behind Vance began to open, revealing the long-sought elevator to the surface. Malik, bullet-ridden and gasping, turned to Cliff with a savage grin. "Go! Get out of here!" he roared, bashing another guard aside. With his last ounce of strength, he roared like a berserker, grappling multiple enemies at once, giving Cliff the only chance they had. Cliff felt anguish at leaving him behind, but Malik's sacrifice was unmistakable. With tears stinging his eyes, Cliff lunged through the opening blast doors. He slammed the control panel on the opposite side, shutting them behind him, sealing off the corridor. Outside, the sounds of fierce combat continued, gunfire, shouts, and Malik's defiant roar. Cliff turned to face the elevator. It stood ready, the indicator lights reading surface. He stumbled inside, blood trickling down his arm. Another control panel, more buttons. With trembling fingers he activated the lift. The doors slid shut and the car began its ascent, leaving the horrors of the subterranean labyrinth behind. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow. Cliff's wounded shoulder throbbed, and flashes of memory darted through his mind. Dr. Knox's cryptic warnings, the ghastly experiments, Malik's sacrifice. He clutched the data drive Dr. Knox had sent him, an item he'd stashed in a hidden pocket when everything went downhill. If he made it out, this was proof. No one could sweep this under the rug if he showed it to the world. At last, the elevator ground to a stop. The doors opened to a cavernous hangar dimly lit by overhead floodlights. A bitter desert breeze wafted in from an open ramp, along with a sliver of night sky glinting with stars. Cliff nearly wept at the sight. He was so close to freedom. But the hangar wasn't empty. Rows of sleek, futuristic aircraft lined the space, some human-made, others bearing the eerie curves and glowing panels that whispered of alien tech. Guards patrolled the perimeter. A single door on the far side read exit, presumably leading to the desert outside. If not for the bullet wound and the exhaustion gripping every muscle, Cliff might have tried to slip past them unnoticed, but Major Vance's men would be on his heels soon. Stealth was no longer an option. He scanned the lineup of vehicles until he spotted something he recognized. A US military VTOL, parked near fueling stations. A sign identified it as V292 Harrier X, an advanced vertical takeoff craft. Cliff's adrenaline surged. If he could get that airborne, he could outrun any foot soldiers. With his newly heightened reflexes, maybe, just maybe, he could pilot the damn thing. Ducking behind crates, he made his way toward the VTOL. The guards were at the opposite end of the hangar, apparently more focused on the meltdown happening below. He clambered into the cockpit, searching for the ignition or startup sequence. His trembling fingers found a biometric scanner, which beeped red, denying him access. "Great," he muttered. "Of course." He fished through the cockpit compartments, hoping for a key override or code. Time was running out. Then he remembered Elliot's data device. Could it do more than just store coordinates? He plugged it into the craft's console. The screen flashed, displaying lines of code. After a tense few seconds, it beeped again, this time turning green. Access granted. The computerized voice resonated in the cockpit. The craft whirred to life, panels lighting up. Cliff exhaled relief so palpable it nearly buckled him. Outside, alarm klaxons abruptly grew louder, echoing from an open shaft at the hangar's far end. Soldiers spilled in, guns drawn. They spotted the running VTOL and converged. Cliff's hands flew across the controls, guided partly by training he'd picked up as an embedded journalist with military units, and partly by the surge of alien-coded knowledge pulsing in his brain. He realized with eerie clarity he understood this machine better than he should, as if the alien DNA was translating the technology for him on the fly. The VTOL's engines rumbled, thrusters angled downward. Bullets pinged off the armoured hull, Cliff's senses hyper-focused. He read the lines of trajectory in the soldier's aim, weaving in his seat as if physically dodging bullets. The thrusters roared, and the craft lifted off in a plume of exhaust. The hangar's overhead doors were wide open, revealing a star-dappled sky. Cliff nosed the VTOL upward, slipping through the gap just as tracer fire chased him into the night. A wave of chaotic freedom swept over him. The desert stretched out below in an endless black plain, only occasional pinpricks of light marking roads or small towns. He risked a glance at the cockpit's radar. Blips closed in from behind, most likely drone fighters or pursuit craft. The base was pulling out all stops to keep him from escaping. Cliff gritted his teeth, throttle wide open. The VTOL soared into a steep climb. The first wave of drone fighters erupted from the hangar, sleek shapes backlit by the moon. They accelerated with inhuman agility, weaving into formation behind Cliff. Their weapons glowed ominously, locking onto his craft. Panic flared, but again his enhancements kicked in. He spotted an array of advanced countermeasures in the Harrier X's system. Chaff bursts, directed energy pulses, maneuvers that normal human reflexes couldn't possibly execute in time. He twisted the craft in a near-impossible roll, dodging 2 missiles that whooshed past. Then he triggered a chaff cloud that caused a 3rd missile to detonate prematurely. The fiery explosion lit the desert sky. Cliff prayed no innocent towns were below to witness this aerial nightmare. The dogfight grew more intense. One drone soared overhead, peppering him with pulse blasts. Another looped under, attempting to flank. Cliff clenched the stick, adrenaline coursing. The craft soared into a harrowing barrel roll, flipping above the second drone. He hammered the trigger, releasing a barrage of armour-piercing rounds. The drone disintegrated in a spray of sparks. His luck couldn't hold forever, though. The pursuit craft had an advantage in numbers and advanced weaponry. A well-timed pulse blast smashed into the VTOL's rear thrusters, sending him spinning. Cockpit alarms wailed. Cliff fought the controls, forcing the Harrier X into a stabilizing loop. He dove low, hugging the desert floor, hoping to use the terrain for cover. Miraculously, the drones faltered, maybe losing him in the darkness. It gave him a narrow window to push the thrusters to maximum, heading west, away from the base. It took everything he had to keep the battered VTOL stable. The instrument panel flickered, warning lights ablaze. He half expected the entire craft to burst into flames. Eventually, the radar showed the drones falling back, possibly recalled or out of range. Cliff's shoulders sagged. He angled north, remembering Dr. Elliot's final words. They've already started deploying the first wave. It's bigger than you know. Her voice echoed in his mind, stirring dread. If Dulce Base was just one node in a global network, a single victory here wouldn't stop the monstrous plan. The Harrier X sputtered, forcing him to make an emergency landing in a rocky clearing miles from the nearest road. He brought the craft down rough, bouncing against the desert ground. When it finally skidded to a halt, Cliff sat there, catching his breath. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him. A single beep from the console indicated the fuel was nearly depleted, the thrusters heavily damaged. Struggling out of the cockpit, Cliff stared at the star-filled sky. For a fleeting moment, the quiet was so absolute, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Then he reached for his phone, a device he'd stowed away in a pocket. No signal. He needed to get word out, but the desert night wasn't going to make that easy. Pain flared in his shoulder, and he realized the bullet graze was worse than he'd thought. He tore a strip of cloth from his shirt and fashioned a makeshift bandage. His thoughts turned to Dr. Andrea Elliott, to Malik Rivera's last stand, to Dr. Knox, who had vanished before any of this truly began. Am I the only one left who can tell the story? He wondered bitterly. It took him until dawn to hike to a tiny highway rest stop. Along the way, he quietly marvelled at his own stamina. The alien enhancement still hummed within him, though overshadowed by pain and fatigue. By the time the first rays of sun crept over the horizon, he found a payphone outside a dusty gas station. He called the only number he could think of, a contact in an underground journalist network that specialised in covert leaks. Voice shaky, he gave them the barest details. "Get me a secure line. I've got a story bigger than anything we ever imagined." Days later, Cliff was holed up in a safe house in the southwestern desert. He transmitted Knox's data to international news outlets. He included photos, x-rays, laboratory logs, everything needed to piece together the truth about Dulce Base. Then he waited, uncertain if anyone would believe it. A few smaller outlets picked it up, followed by an explosion of coverage on conspiracy forums. But mainstream media was suspiciously silent. It was as if some invisible hand was blocking the story from major platforms, just as it had always done. At midnight, a messenger arrived with a sealed envelope. Cliff opened it, finding only a slip of paper bearing coordinates that pointed to a remote region in the Rockies. Written underneath, in neat official handwriting, was, "Dulce is just the beginning. We need to talk. General Hamilton." Cliff's heart drummed in his chest. Was this a trap? Or a genuine high-ranking officer willing to blow the lid on more than just Dulce? He clenched his fists, recalling Dr. Elliot's dying words. They've already started deploying the first wave. It's bigger than you know. The faint neon glow of a motel sign flickered through the window, painting the room in shifting shades of red. He had a choice: walk away now and try to disappear, or follow this lead deeper into the hidden war. There was really no choice at all. Cliff had seen too much, been changed in ways he couldn't reverse. The journalist in him demanded answers, demanded justice. The next morning he packed up his battered equipment, the data drive, and whatever little remained of his old life, setting out towards those mysterious new coordinates. In the back of his mind, a single certainty loomed. Dulce Base was just one front in a war about to spread across the globe, post-human war for control, survival, and the future of species on Earth. and so the Dulce Protocol ended here, for now, but the real battle was only just beginning.